The goal of this lesson is to teach you how to configure authentication between OSPF routers. We will use the file we created in our previous lesson by completing the configuration of this multiple area OSPF network. So everything is fully functioning. All we need to do is add authentication. The idea behind authentication is to have two routers authenticate to each other. So it's configured on interfaces, and we can start from these two routers. For example, router LAN and router R1. And we will do two different types of authentication configuration. First one is without hashing, so you send the password in clear text. And the second one is with hashing. We will use MD5. So let's get into it. Enable configure terminal, and we want to configure this fast Ethernet 0/0 interface. So I'm going to get into the interface fast Ethernet 0/0. And now we want to define the password that these two routers will use to authenticate to each other. So the command for that is IP-OSPF authentication. Okay, a bit difficult with spelling. And then -key. Unfortunately, you can't use the tab key here because there is a command which goes IP-OSPF authentication and then space and then something else. So you have to type the entire word yourself. So here we need to specify the password, and we will say cyber, for example. You can use your own password, but make sure to configure the same keyword on the other router. All right, enter. And now to enable this authentication, there is a different command, IP-OSPF authentication. So that's the command I was telling you about. And then we need to say message digest. We have now enabled authentication on this router. And that means that the neighboring router, router 1, doesn't have the password that this router requires in order to establish an OSPF connection with its neighbors. So we are about to see the link between them go down. We might have to wait a couple of seconds for that to happen. And there it is, neighbor down, neighbor down. In order to establish that connection again, we need to go to router 1 and configure pretty much the same things we configured on router LAN. So enable configure terminal, interface fast Ethernet 0/0, IP-OSPF authentication key, cyber. So make sure that the password is the same on both routers. They are using this to authenticate to each other. And then to enable authentication, IP-OSPF authentication message digest. The link should go up soon, so let's wait for that. And there it is, so we can assume that the authentication was successful. If you're wondering where you can see this configuration, let's do show running config. When we go to our fast Ethernet 0/0 interface, we can see all the commands that we typed in. So it's there. But the password is being sent over the link in clear text. In order to have it hashed, we need to configure this differently, and we will do that between router 1 and router 2. Configure terminal. We're going to get into interface fast Ethernet 0/1 on this side, and on router 2 it's fast Ethernet 0/0. The command this time is IP-OSPF message digest -key, and then you need to enter the key ID, And this allows the routers to reference multiple passwords, but we won't really use that. So the only thing that's important here is to use the same key ID on both routers where you're configuring this. So after the key ID, you say which hashing algorithm you want to use. We're going to use MD5, and then we need to specify the password. Let's use cyber again. And then to enable authentication, the command is the same. So IP authentication message, IP OSPF authentication message digest. That's it. This link will now go down. So let's wait for that informational message. And there it is. Let's move on to router 2 now. We're going to try the third command that I wanted to show you here. Enable configure terminal interface fast Ethernet 0/0. So you have to configure the password someplace, and it should be on an interface, of course. So we're going to use the same password we used on a router 1. We're going to say IP OSPF message digest key 1 MD5 cyber. And then to enable OSPF authentication, we will not use that IP OSPF authentication message digest command on the interface. Rather, we're going to go into the OSPF configuration and say area 0. And what this means is enable authentication on all interfaces on this router that belong to area 0. So we're going to say area 0 authentication message digest. And what we should see now is we should see this link come up, but then this link should go down because we have now enabled authentication with this password on all area 0 interfaces. Now on these interfaces right here, and I'm pointing at one interface, but this is a router on a stick, so we have two logical interfaces on this one physical interface. These two interfaces, yes, they belong to area 0, but they don't have any OSPF neighbors here. Now that I think of it, there should have been a passive interface, but never mind. Okay, so we can see that on serial 001, we have a neighbor down, right? To fix that, we can go to router web, and this will be the last one to configure because I think by now you got the point. Enable configure terminal interface serial 001 IP OSPF message digest key 1 MD5 cyber, and then we're going to say IP OSPF authentication message digest, and the link should go up now. And when it does, that's it for this exercise. Now, routing protocol authentication is not actually that common. It's usually used for external links or establishing an OSPF or EIGRP neighborship with an external router. So there's not much point in doing it all the way. So configuring it between all of these routers within your network. Yeah, so that's it for this exercise. See you in the next one.